Over 20,000 federal workers have been fired over the past several weeks. People like scientists, veteran caregivers, forest rangers, suddenly fired overnight. No reason, just poof, gone. And now we have federal judges coming in and saying, not on my watch, it was illegal. Let's get into it. A month ago, across the country, thousands of federal employees woke up to the worst email of their lives. You're fired. We're talking about over 2,000 at the Veteran Affairs alone, and then dozens of agencies like the Department of Agriculture, like Energy, like Education. They were just gone from their jobs. These are people that were either new to the federal government, and then you had people that had over 10 years, 20 years in, they took another position, they were placed back on probation, they were impacted as well, they were fired. Now, what I don't understand is where people rush in and say, hey, it's just like the private sector. So people lose their jobs. No big deal. Just stop crying and get back out there and find another job. The private sector is different than the public sector. For one, the private sector operates on profits. So the reason they fire somebody largely is to maximize profits. That's not what the public sector is here for. They're here to provide essential services and to serve the public. When the private sector fires somebody, it is a business decision. When someone's fired in the public sector, it could be for political reasons. It could be retaliation. There's a system there that offers protection. And simply because the private sector does not offer those same protections, I don't understand why you would rush over and say, well, welcome to the club. Everyone's getting fired over here. Does that make sense for you to say that? It's not about public sector workers or federal employees getting special treatment. It's about ensuring fairness, consistency, and accountability to a system that answers to the public and not to shareholders. The big legal problem with the Great Probationary Purge is it was not just one agency, one office, or one manager letting a person go and saying, hey, we don't need you because your performance or your conduct is unacceptable. These were tens of thousands of people from multiple agencies. It was a coordinated attack. So this is a reduction in force. And if you want to do one of those, if you want to riff a reduction in force, that's fine. Just follow the legal guidelines that outline how you're supposed to address a reduction in force. It's not like this. This was a hasty, quick way to go around the rules, to go ahead and identify the easy, low-hanging fruit, the easy targets, and to cut them away without going through the RIF procedures. So first we had Senior District Judge William Alsup from Northern California. He dropped his ruling. These firings? Illegal, unlawful, a total sham. So he ordered 6 agencies to reinstate their probationary employees that were recently fired. Now, he has previously ruled that this was illegal, but he has never told agencies to reinstate. So this is the first time he is mandating, legally requiring the federal agency to take action and to reinstate their employees. The official excuse for most of these firings? 2 words: poor performance. These employees were told they're not cutting it. Now, the federal judge, he doesn't buy that. One example, Forest Service scientist, still in her probationary period, gets fired for poor performance. Her latest review, fully successful in every category. In every single category, fully successful. Now, a reduction in force is totally allowed under the Reduction in Force Act. It's how the federal government can shrink their workforce if their budget is decreased. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way, but there are strict rules to include a notice, a 60-day notice. Now, agencies can request a waiver for 30 days, but it's not overnight. You shouldn't be going to sleep one night, waking up, and all of a sudden you found out you were booted. It shouldn't be that quick. 30-day notice minimum, and that just wasn't happening. So what's the government's response? Well, it's pretty ugly. We have the OPM's acting director that's just straight up refusing to testify or sit for a deposition. He says he's not talking. The Trump administration, they're withdrawing previously submitted statements, and now basically they're telling agency heads to be more vocal about them taking accountability of the decision, saying, yeah, I'm the Secretary of Labor and I actually authorized this and I believe it's the best thing for my agency. That's not what we have been hearing in the past. So when will these employees get reinstated? Immediately. Right now. In fact, some people have already been reinstated. I've talked to close to a dozen people that have informed me that they're getting their job back. Other people, they don't want it back. They're moving on. They had a horrible experience. They don't even want to come back into the government. Now, for the agencies, they have 7 days in order to have a list sent to the judge of every employee that was impacted by this action, by the probationary purge. So that has to be in by March 20th. And they have to outline exactly what actions they took for corrective action. How do they fix it? But of course, some federal agencies, they'll drag their feet. Look at the USDA. 6,000 federal employees were supposed to be reinstated by March 5th. We're in the middle of March, and that hasn't happened for the most part. Then you have the CDC. One employee said they only rehired 200 people, and the rest of them, they're still fighting to be reinstated. It's chaos, and real people are caught in the crossfire. And it's not just this one rogue federal judge that's creating this chaos and making some radical decision. There's another federal judge. This time, it's not California, it's the state of Maryland. And he shares the same sentiment. He actually went a step further and placed a restraining order on 12 federal agencies. They were also ordered to restate their probationary employees by March 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern. He called the entire firing process an illegal scheme spanning broad swaths of the federal workforce. But let's take a deeper look, because these federal judges, they're not only angry at the probationary employees that have been fired, they're looking at the MSPB and they're looking at the OSC and they're seeing how that's being dismantled. Okay, so MSPB, they didn't have a quorum earlier this year, and back in 2017, they also didn't have a quorum. So that creates backlog. And the MSPB, that is the line of defense. When a federal employee feels like they've been unfairly fired, that's where they appeal to. So when you do not have a quorum on that board, it creates a huge issue. Then you have the OSC, which is the Office of Special Counsel, which is another watchdog for federal workers. They primarily handle cases involving whistleblower retaliation, prohibited personnel practices, and violation of federal employment laws. Trump fired the head of the OSC, Dillinger. He was the head of the agency. He was fired and then reinstated by another court. And now the appeals court, they're saying, hold on, don't reinstate him. So it looks like President Trump might have won a victory there. So you have the MSPB, you have the OSC. They're losing their power. It seems like the administration is doing everything within its power to remove and strip away as much civil protections as they can in order to terminate more and more federal employees. But there is some good news in all this. Lawmakers are introducing a bill called Protect Our Probationary Employees Act. This was introduced into Congress this month. And what it does is, if you get reinstated as a probationary employee, you do not have to start at the beginning. Meaning that, for example, if an individual did 11 months from probation and 12 months they were going to be off of it. So if you get fired and reinstated, you only have to do the 1 month to hit the 12-month mark. So you don't have to do the entire probationary period all over again. And this is becoming a popular bill. It has 41 co-sponsors, to include, surprisingly, 2 Republicans. So they're trying to fix this. They're trying to at least propose something to relieve some of the pain before it gets completely out of hand. It's also set to cover every probationary firing in the Trump administration until January 2029. In a recent interview, I was asked, where do I see federal jobs going in 2025, towards the end of the year? How's that going to look like? I saw two big things happening. Number one is you're probably going to see an increase in contractors. Now that seems a little counter to the narrative right now, because there are contracts that are being cut all across the federal government, and supposedly they're going to save billions of dollars that way. But what happened in the past with Clinton? President Bill Clinton cut 380,000 federal employees, and once those cuts were made, we saw that there were no real savings, because Every time you cut a federal employee, you leave a gap, you leave a void, there's a hole there. So the answer, especially from the conservative side, the answer is to give it to the private sector. So the private sector means give it to contractors. So we could be spending just as much money, if not more money, augmenting the federal workforce with these contracting companies. So that might be a great thing if you're in the market to look for a contracting job, or if you're operating in that space. The second thing really is, right now, there's about 5,000 to 6,000 jobs open on usajobs.gov, but nobody wants to apply. So there's been a dramatic decrease in the interest of getting a government job. I would say, from my perspective, about 80% less. That is an enormous reduction in interest of being a public servant, of getting a federal government job. So what do you do if you even have a small amount of interest in a government job? When people are fearful, you could apply. Less competition, it might be easier to get in, especially if it's in one of those areas like immigration, public safety, national security. There could be opportunities that you could take while everyone is scared on the sidelines, kind of like the stock market. In a recession, when we're down 20, 25, 30% in the stock market, nobody wants to buy. They think it's a horrible time. But that's where you make the most money. That's where the opportunity is when everyone is scared, taking the counter action. So that might be a message for a lot of people that are thinking about it, but they're not exactly sure. It could represent an opportunity. Now, nothing about the federal judges' rulings will impact reduction in forces. Reduction in force is another topic. And with the reduction in force, we have the Trump administration using AI in a certain capacity. It's called auto-RIF. Automated reduction in force. It could be used to assist in firing thousands, if not tens of thousands, of federal employees in the near future. If you want to know more about that, check this video out next. If you need a federal resume, check out the links down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.